in the 90s, when the neocons admitted they wanted to overthrow Saddam Hussein, they never said it was because he had nuclear weapons. They said he was a problem for Israel in the region. And by the way, when they talked about wanting to overthrow Iran, it was the same thing. Never had nothing to do with a nuclear threat. That's just the thing they use now as the excuse.
So recently, Dave Smith did a debate with Josh Hammer, moderated by Charlie Kirk for Turning Points USA, regarding the U.S. ties to Israel, the merits of it or the lack thereof, with Dave arguing that ties between the U.S. and Israel should be completely cut off by the United States. Now, this is set to be an epic discussion, so we're going to cover opening statements and Dave's first response. I can't wait to hear this, so let's check out what they have to say. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Introduce yourself, make an introductory statement, and the floor is yours, my friend.
Oh, well, thank you very much, and thank you guys for having me. As Charlie mentioned, I took a flight here, so I'm going on no sleep, so if Josh wins, it doesn't count. But I'm a stand-up comedian, and I'm also a libertarian. I'm really a follower of the greatest congressman who's ever lived, who is Dr. Ron Paul, who is turning 90 years old. Happy birthday to him. As far as, look, I would say I think that American foreign policy for my entire life has been insane, and like criminally insane. We've launched war after war. We've talked about peace through strength the whole time, but all we've gotten is permanent militarism and forever wars against countries that pose no threat to us. And a huge part of the reason why we've embarked on this is because the neoconservatives hijacked our foreign policy, and they were in power after 9/11. And the neoconservatives, as everybody who's followed it knows, were joined at the hip with the Likud party. That's just a fact. They all admit it in their own words. And you can go back and you can read the Clean Break memo. You can read the companion piece, Coping with Crumbling States. This was written by David Wormser and Richard Pearl. And they laid out their plan. Now, their plan was that to help Israel, the clean break is a break from the peace process, a break from Oslo, which was designed to give the Palestinians their own state. And these neoconservative geniuses decided that instead of the Israelis making peace with the Palestinians, they could just have the U.S. overthrow all of the surrounding governments that were giving Israel a hard time.
Yeah, this is exactly right. That is what the clean break strategy was, and I'm with Dave. The entire panoply of U.S. foreign policy in my lifetime has been an abject disaster in so many regards, and much of it has been done on behalf of Israel's desires, the Israeli government in particular. And there were people complicit, very much so, with this aim in the U.S. government, namely the neoconservatives that Dave references here. Now, sometimes I've recently heard, Mark Levin say, if you say neocon, it's just another way of being anti-Semitic toward Jews, but a lot of these neoconservatives were ostensibly Christians, like George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and others, Lindsey Graham, right? These are the people that launched all these perilous wars, namely the two biggest, the occupation of Afghanistan and Iraq, which were both 20-plus year affairs, where we spent billions of dollars, 20 years, and expended hundreds of thousands of lives in Afghanistan to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. And in Iraq, we replaced Saddam's Sunni, relatively secular regime with ISIS terrorists and then fundamentalists later. So that's where we are now. None of them was worth it. But Israel also wanted to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi in Libya and also Assad in Syria. USAID actually dumped $15 billion against the regime in Syria. That didn't, finally fall to the pro-Iranian side until 2024, late in 2024, but that goal was reached too, and that was on behalf of Israel. And actually, the U.S. teamed up for a time with Iran-backed rebels that were fighting ISIS there, and then you pretend that Iran just is so absurd that it can't be negotiated with in this recent war. So Dave's right here.
And this is where four-star general Wesley Clark says that he saw the plans right after 9/11 to overthrow 7 countries in the next 5 years. And what was the last country on that list? It was Iran. Okay? This is a big part of what the whole conflict is about. Now, the neoconservative has kind of become like a pejorative for war hawks these days, and don't get me wrong, I support that. Keep calling them neocons. But the actual neoconservatives, the self-identified neoconservatives, aren't really in power anymore. But Benjamin Netanyahu is still in power in Israel, and the Likud party is still pushing for this. Now, I want very quickly, I'll try to not go too long here. Okay, they actually did focus group testing back in the 90s before the first Gulf War in Iraq. And you know, Americans weren't really moved by, we have to reinstall the king of Kuwait, but they were moved by the nuclear threat. Now, if you go read Coping with Crumbling States or the Clean Break memo, in the 90s when the neocons admitted they wanted to overthrow Saddam Hussein, they never said it was because he had nuclear weapons. They said he was a problem for Israel in the region. They only made up that lie after 9/11 because they knew that's what would sell you, or maybe not you, you're too young, but sell your moms and dads on going and fighting this war.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My good friend Daniel McAdams says that war propaganda greases the wheels of the war machine, and I think he's absolutely right, because when they know that Americans won't just innately support some of these absurd military adventures across the sea and regime change operations that they desire so much, they have to drum up a propaganda campaign and narrative to back that. And unless you oppose that at the beginning, they can generally, win the favor over of Americans. They won a lot of us over in regard to the Iraq War too in 2002 and 2003, especially over this kind of propaganda campaign. So it's really important not only to be anti-war, but anti-war propaganda, and see it and sniff it and smell it out before they are able to completely launch it and then justify their law or their wars based on it.
And by the way, when they talked about wanting to overthrow Iran, it was the same thing. Never had nothing to do with a nuclear threat. That's just the thing they use now as the excuse. So yes, there is tremendous influence by Israel in our government. That doesn't mean I'm subscribing to some crazy conspiracy or telling you to hate Jewish people. I'm Jewish. I'm just saying they have influence. They've used it in a very negative way, and we should reject this insane foreign policy and embrace the foreign policy that Dr. Ron Paul advocated, which is the foreign policy of the founding fathers. Stay out of entangling alliances, stay out of unnecessary wars, be friends with the world, and trade with the world. That's the key to prosperity.
Yeah, absolutely right. And he is just so totally correct about the right approach here. The old right used to understand it. The Robert Tafts and Pat Buchanans, they understood this, that, you can't have a limited government world empire. And if you accept that you can, you give up any prospect of a limited government. And, Ron Paul's exactly right about this. He also made the point about the neoconservatives, that being a pejorative. It's because everything they touch turns into a disaster, a complete disaster, unmitigated disaster. And that's why it's become a pejorative. But I don't accept that it hasn't gone away. We've seen incredible influence by that line of thinking in foreign policy. And today's hawks are honestly indistinguishable from the neocons. So I'm with Dave. Keep calling them neocons. And if they say, hey, I'm not a neocon, all the neocons are dead or whatever, you can just say, well, in what areas do you disagree with these people? And there won't be many, because what they tend to favor now is the same types of military traps that all the neocons throughout history have favored. Sometimes they'll look back and admit that the Iraq War was a mistake. Actually, even Bill Kristol did that in a debate with Scott Horton. But even then, it wasn't like they were right about that at the time, and they still are, advocating for and being the champions of wars today.
Thank you, Dave. Josh, opening statement. Feel free to respond, and then we'll proceed as we go. So that was about 3.5, 4 minutes. So same amount of time.
All right, so it's really great to be here. Thank you, Charlie, for having me. Thank you, Turning Point, for having me back. It's really wonderful to be at this amazing conference. Dave joked that he didn't get any sleep last night. Today's actually also a fast day on the Jewish calendar. I'm not eating or even drinking water. So we're all on the same page here. We're all just totally screwed. So you can kind of get off the same starting place there. Look, there's a lot of substance to respond to. I'll just really briefly do that, and then we'll talk about what I actually want to talk about in my opening remarks. Dave mentioned this alleged coordination between the neoconservatives, which I presume he means Bush-era foreign policy, and the Likud party. I presume half of you probably don't even know what the Likud party is. It's referring to the Israeli right. It's very instructive, and Dave always conveniently neglects to inform the audience of this, that the actual leader of the Israeli right back in 2002, a man by the name of Ariel Sharon, vehemently opposed the Bush administration going into Iraq. So this whole notion that Israel is talking America into foreign wars is total nonsense.
That's not true at all. Actually, Benjamin Netanyahu himself, also part of Likud, and was sent by Ariel Sharon's government to Congress to promote the idea of overthrowing Saddam. This is not a conspiracy. You can find that footage out there. And I'm paraphrasing Netanyahu, but in that congressional testimony, he said, I can guarantee you that if you replace Saddam Hussein's government, it will send positive reverberations throughout the region. This is well documented, and he's not correct about that. Now, what I think he might be getting at is there was a time in which some of Ariel Sharon's subordinates at one point were like, hey, I don't think overthrowing Iraq's a good idea right now because we can get to that, but overthrowing Iran is a better idea and a higher priority, and you should do that. And by the way, that priority still remains, as we've seen even in the last month, and it will still remain from here on because we know that they've always wanted regime change in Iran. Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't even dance around this. He's on the record saying that he wants the Libya model to apply in Iran, which was a regime change operation against Gaddafi. That's what he wants in Iran too. So Hammer's wrong on this.
Actually, in 2011, when the Obama administration toppled Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, it's actually well known that Libya actually sent secret diplomatic envoys to Israel, trying to tell them to then talk to the United States and France to talk NATO off of that attack there. So this whole narrative is totally backwards there.
Well, okay, so of course they would want, to talk powers that are willing to fight wars against them out of doing that. That's not just like a stunning conclusion that Israel somehow was unsupportive of that. In fact, again, Netanyahu in that 2002 congressional testimony also said he wanted Gaddafi to be overthrown as well. This has been long-standing Israeli preference and Israeli policy, and it goes back to the clean break memo that Dave Smith referenced before, where Wesley Clark, 10 days after 9/11, went into the Pentagon. He saw a list of planned regime change operations that had 7 countries, and it was supposed to happen in 5 years. The only one that hasn't happened is Iran by now, and one of them was Libya, and one of them was Iran. And, we're dealing with that now. But Hammer's wrong. Just because Libya sent envoys to try to get Israel to talk the U.S. out of this NATO-led coalition to disrupt the government and, undermine and destroy Gaddafi's regime, it doesn't mean that Israel was opposed to that, obviously. They were supportive of the war.
But I want to kind of dumb things down a little bit here. I see a lot of people wearing 47 hats. I voted for President Trump multiple times. I love our president. You guys love our president, right? You love President Trump? Okay. This is Turning Point freaking USA. Charlie, God bless you. You have built the largest MAGA grassroots army in the country. Seriously, my friend, you deserve this. You all are card-carrying members of it. We here are part of that. The good news is that while no one should be afraid of debate, and this debate is a nice thing here, the MAGA movement is actually quite unified. Believe it or not, all the talk to the contrary when it comes to these issues. An overwhelming majority of self-identified MAGA Republicans support close U.S.-Israel relations. According to a CBS News poll, moreover, after the recent Operation Midnight Hammer B-2 bombers in Iran, 94% of self-identified MAGA Republicans supported President Trump's dropping those B-2 bombs on Fort Natanz and the other Iranian facilities there. This is a wildly popular policy there.
Okay, so I don't have reason to doubt that it's generally popular within Republican circles, but I also saw Tucker Carlson's speech to this same crowd at Turning Points USA, where he criticized, Epstein's associations with Israel and foreign aid to Israel in general, if Israel doesn't divulge its associations with Epstein, being met with cheers. So I also know that some of the activist base is turning against this now. And we've seen that in various affairs related to Iran, that you have people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and even Matt Walsh talking about this in ways that never would have been possible before. And trust me, I'm not on board with the populist right on many things, but you can see some of the top people turning against this now. So there might be some merit into that when it comes to, Republicans in general. But a lot of the dissidents aren't accepting this pro-Israeli narrative anymore.
What did Dave Smith say about this? He re-upped his now years-long crusade to call for Donald Trump's impeachment. Y'all probably don't know that about Dave Smith, do you? He's now called for Donald Trump to be impeached multiple times.
It's a well-known fact about Dave Smith. He's called him a war criminal, which he is. He's called for his impeachment on launching unconstitutional and immoral wars, which he has. This is not a unknown characteristic of Dave Smith. He's very much on the record for this.
But Dave, look, I don't like when people misquote me either. You probably don't like when people misquote you. So I actually have a little bit of a highlight reel here of Dave Smith's tweets over the years. Dave Smith, March 19th, 2024. Donald Trump is responsible for around 500,000 deaths in Yemen, and between the weapons to Ukraine and the Abraham Accords Jerusalem embassy, he is at least partially responsible for the two worst humanitarian crises in the world. He's a war criminal who should spend his life in prison.
And Josh, which part of that is false? I guarantee you Josh won't answer that. He won't address what Dave actually said. He'll just, float this out there to a pro-Trump rally and be like, hey, see? He won't refute it. Watch. I'm just predicting. I haven't seen this, I swear.
He is calling Donald Trump a war criminal who should spend his life in prison. You should be livid at that. I am livid at that as a Trump supporter. Donald Trump...
Yep, moving on to the next one. That's exactly what these people do.
Dave Smith, June 16, 2025. Trump allegedly had full prior knowledge of Israel's attacks and gave it his blessing while pretending to be negotiating with the Iranians as a cover. If this is true, Trump is the most impotent bitch of a leader imaginable. He's calling our president, the greatest president in my lifetime, an impotent bitch.
Okay, so again, tell us where he's wrong there. He won't. He just will attack Dave with ad hominem and or just, these reflexive notions about the incendiary things Dave has said toward Trump without actually addressing those things. He's not trying to refute why he's not a bitch or why it was just to shelve negotiations with Iran on behalf of Netanyahu and Israel's war. He can't defend that, so he'll just, hold this and dangle this carrot over a pro-Trump audience to try to satiate them. It's just so stupid.
Are you kidding me? June 21st, 2025, Donald Trump has now launched an illegal war of aggression against Iran. The risk of an absolute catastrophe is very high, and the benefits are non-existent. Dave Smith, June 21st.
And that's true. There's a ceasefire now, but only because of Iranian restraint in their counterattack where they tipped Trump off to it. Regime change was on the table. Trump tweeted as much. He said, if Iran doesn't want to make Iran great again, why shouldn't there be regime change? He surrounded himself with Mossad agents in the briefing rooms, basically because of the presence of John Ratcliffe, the pro-Zionist shill that arranged for that, deliberately so to guide him into a more incendiary posture regarding Iran. He broke the potential for a new JCPOA that would have normalized and eased relations with Iran like we had in 2015 to 2018 under the JCPOA, the only good thing Obama really ever did in terms of foreign policy. He was a nightmare otherwise with the JCPOA, which they complied with. All the congressional records show Iran complied with this, got shelled because of that. And now Iran will be dedicated to getting a nuke. If I'm an Iranian nationalist, the first thing I want to do is fast track a nuke because of how I've been bullied around by Israel and the United States. Why wouldn't I? And it seems that these attacks have galvanized pro-Iranian government sentiment within Iran. There's no rebellions, there's no waving of American flags or any of that nonsense. This was an attack by Israel, and the first thing they attacked was a residential complex in pursuit of this decapitation strategy.
Dead wrong. This notion that World War III would start, not a single American casualty. We should be celebrating that. Donald Trump fulfilled multiple.
Because of Iranian restraint against your neocon narrative that said, Iran wanted to wipe Israel off the map. They just want to kill as many Americans as they can. That's why that this didn't grow into a larger affair at the time. I still think it could, by the way, because it's only in time that Netanyahu will renew the war propaganda that they are weeks away from a nuke. He's been saying that my entire adult lifetime and some of my child lifetime. For at least 30 years, he's said that. Since 1992, we have examples in which he's said that. So no, Josh, that wasn't wise, and this is preposterous.
He fulfilled multiple campaign promises. The escalator speech in 2015 at Trump Tower, he literally said, I'm not going to let Iran get a nuclear weapon. And guess what? He said, I oppose a neoconservative foreign policy. He did both of those things with Iran. He deprived the Iranian regime of nuclear weapon while not losing a single American sailor, soldier, or Marine while depriving them of nuclear weapons.
I'm sorry, unconstitutional bombings in which Congress doesn't authorize it is textbook neoconservatism. It's textbook neoconservatism. It's what they called for in the Project for a New American Century. They also called for regime change, which I presume Josh wants in Iran. I haven't heard him say that tonight, but I think that he has indicated that that is what he's wanted in the past. That is neoconservatism. And bombing just countries arbitrarily because of Israel's desires over the United States is textbook neoconservatism.
Finally, Charlie, I'll end on this. Dave Smith, July 8th, 2025. In the last month, Donald Trump has launched a war of aggression on behalf of a foreign government, exploded the debt, announced that he's continuing the Biden policy of arming Ukraine, and covered up a giant child rape operation. So according to my interlocutor, Donald Trump is not just engaging in wars on behalf of a foreign government, he is also covering up the world's giant pedophilic child sex trafficking ring, allegedly, I presume, on behalf of a foreign government as well. So I'm disgusted, frankly, that this man is on stage, but I'll end it.
But where is he wrong? Again, Josh only really referred to actual arguments to a few of those tweets. I think one of the four that he read, he actually made some actual arguments against them. The others were just, look at how devious and villainous this Dave Smith guy was. Literally, that's what he did.
Okay, well, got it. So you can see peace is hard. I'm trying to keep the peace. Now, Dave, I want to give you an opportunity, about 4 minutes to respond to that. But also, I do want to, now that we had the opening salvos and the Tomahawk missiles launched, let's respond as you see fit. No, and then bring us to the 12-day war. Because let's stay focused on that.
Yeah.
We can.
Well, the thing, Charlie,
but defend yourself.
Sure.
Obviously.
Well, the thing is, Charlie, as you may have noticed, and some of you may have seen some of my other debates, every single time I come up here to debate issues, and they come up here to debate me and my character. It's all they have every single time. Because they can't actually take on any of the arguments. And so the most pathetic, low-hanging fruit of, you guys like Trump, this guy said bad things about Trump. Listen, guys, I'm a free American. I supported Donald Trump in this last election. Yes, he did just actively cover up a giant child rapist ring, and I'm going to criticize him for that.
Amen, he did. And Josh Hammer didn't counter that in any way. And that is what they do to Dave Smith every time.
Okay? And I'm sorry, after all these years of us right-wingers saying, protect the children, come on, that's bad for your soul if you don't. You speak up about that. It's horrible what he's doing. And, as far as the actual substance of what Josh said here, which there really wasn't much, but I already pointed this out the last time we debated, his topic about how Sharon was against the war in Iraq is total nonsense. Sharon's envoy initially opposed it when he found out that Bush was going to invade Iraq, not because he didn't want Saddam Hussein to be overthrown, but because he wanted regime change in Iran first.
Yeah, this is exactly true. Dave's spot on here.
And then, when the George W. Bush administration assured him that Iran would come next, they got on board with it and they started pumping out all types of propaganda about how Saddam Hussein's nuclear secret sites that didn't exist. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the longest-serving prime minister in Israeli history, that year, in 2002, came to Congress and testified under, a congressional testimony that anyone can go watch, and advocated not that the U.S. let Israel do it, but that the U.S. overthrow Saddam Hussein. I believe his words were, I guarantee that peace will spread through the region. And he also advocated that we overthrow Muammar Gaddafi and the mullahs in Iran. So you're just wrong about it. That's not true. And yes, have I been critical of Donald Trump when I think he gets things wrong? Yeah. I think that's what we should do. This is America. You criticize the government when they get things wrong. And so I don't even know what else.
Josh, wait 1 sec, Josh. I got to keep the peace here. Dave, about a minute-ish.
Okay.
A minute and a half. No, I'm taking the right time. I'm just...
Look, as far as
take about a minute and a half and try to do the 12-day war thing.
Yeah, sure. As far as the 12-day war goes, look, I'll be honest. Donald Trump, it might be the greatest thing he's ever done in his life that at the end of the 12-day war, he after the Iranian response was as weak as it was, and they gave us advanced warning, so there were no American casualties, he started pushing for a ceasefire. And that was great that he did that. But the point is that the war never needed to be launched to begin with. Iran did not have nuclear weapons. Iran, according to all of the intelligence, including our Director of National Intelligence, until a day after Israel bombed them and she changed her mind, Go read the annual threat assessment from earlier this year. Iran had not made the political decision to acquire a nuclear weapon, and they were in negotiations with Donald Trump at the time to bring their enrichment down. There was just no need other than the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu wants that regime overthrown.
Josh.
Yeah, and he still does. Dave's exactly right here. I think that his rebuttal was strong and powerful. Josh Hammer did have an argument or two, but not to support all of his animosity toward those tweets. For him to pull out the paper and use those tactics was really kind of indistinguishable from the woke left and reading mean tweets that, you know, Trump had made throughout the years. It really, those tactics really are indistinguishable in some ways. And, you know, the neocon foreign policy is just indefensible. It just is. The Israel first mentality is indefensible. It just is. And Dave hit the hammer on the nail there. It has been due to Israel's desires that the U.S. has shelved much of our America First, actual America First policies. Normalizing relations with Iran was an important device that the U.S. could have utilized to, you know, ease tensions throughout the world and the Middle East. And for Israel to, you know, collaborate with the U.S. to shelve those negotiations for a war that never needed to happen is absolutely preposterous. And yeah, I'm glad that off-ramp was taken. The worst scenario did not play out yet, especially, or maybe to some extent it didn't, but it was due to Iranian restraint, which again countered the neocon narrative that all they wanted to do is just kill a bunch of people, including Americans and Israelis. They did not want this war. They didn't want this war at all, and they were pushed into a corner. And even when pushed into a corner and receiving death threats, a lot of the news media covered these stories where Iranian generals were given calls and told to surrender right now. Otherwise, we know where you are. We're going to blow you up. That didn't happen, and I'm glad for that too. That could have raised tensions even further. And all this was just for nothing. And the narrative kept shifting. The war propaganda kept playing out. At first it was we want to negotiate for a new JCPOA where there will be a new inspections regime, that the U.S. will oversee it, and we'll have normalized relationships again. Then it shifted to, well, we're not going to have that, but Israel's doing this alone. They're striking Iran without us. Then it shifted to, well, no, actually, we are going to strike Iran too, but it's awesome. And we struck these 3 nuclear sites. And by the way, it looks like they didn't admit this, but they smuggled the uranium out of Fordo at the very least. And then it became, well, why not there be regime change on the table? The narrative kept shifting to be more and more bellicose. And again, it was only because of Iranian restraint that Trump could take the off-ramp. I'm glad he took it, contrary to the advice of people like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, who Mark Levin's on the Homeland Security Commission. He's a diehard neocon. For all the, you know, animosity toward neocons and vitriolic rhetoric that Trump used to kind of bash them on the campaign trail. He certainly did that with Liz Cheney. They still seem to wield enormous influence in his administration. Mike Waltz was a diehard neocon. Thankfully, he's gone now. But Marco Rubio was a diehard neocon. Mike Huckabee is a diehard neocon Zionist. He surrounds himself with these people and is in many ways bought out and owned by the Israel lobby. But that's where we're at. Dave's right. Our foreign policy is a disaster, and it's at least partially because of U.S. ties to Israel. I don't think that's the full thing. I do think there are Americans in the military-industrial complex and the bankers that are all interested in these wars too, and that stands independent of Israel to some extent. Of course, the forces are tied together, but to some degree, that exists in the United States too. It's an empire-building, warlike mentality that seeks to establish hegemony in the Middle East, keep it forever, and empire build. Well, instead, I have a different idea. I say, you know, bring all of the troops in the Middle East home, shut down all of the foreign-based bases within the Middle East, cut all ties to Israel, all subsidies to Israel, and let them fend for themselves. They're the only power in the region with nuclear weapons, by the way. And may I add, a secret nuclear weapon program that they accused Iran of having. And they're somehow not subject to the NPT or IAEA inspections and won't even admit they have nukes because they just get this special carve-out. It's preposterous, and that's where we're at. So I don't see an end to the Israeli influence in our government until AIPAC goes away, which I'm not counting on anytime soon. And until then, you're going to get doubled down on justifications for Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza, the constant flow of money into Israel. We gave them about $20 billion last year. It's usually about $4 billion. It's going to be more this year too, probably. And we certainly used a lot of money to bring our carrier groups and use, interceptor missiles to defend them, because some of the Iranian missiles got through the Iron Dome too. But that's where we're at. Let me know in the comments below who was right in this debate between Josh Hammer and Dave Smith. Do you think that Dave Smith could have made any points better? Did Josh Hammer have any merits to any of his conversations? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Charlie Kirk. Thanks to him for having this debate. And please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. If you do that, you'll get access to all of my videos before they come out live on YouTube, and you'll support my channel financially, which I greatly appreciate if you go those lengths. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.